That evening, I stood in the middle of the over-the-top HOA gala thrown for Grant Hargrove, surrounded by crystal chandeliers, fake smiles, and those little confetti cannons that shot out HOA-approved beige glitter. My phone buzzed like it had been waiting all day to ruin everything. A brand new $180,000 home equity loan had just cleared in my name. The bank remembered my birthday even if the neighborhood rulers didn't. Then I heard Elaine Hargrove, the self-appointed queen of Pinecrest Meadows HOA, laughing in that syrupy voice she saved for the cameras. Just let her show up late. The signing has to happen first. My name is Elaine Hargrove, and today I turned the community into my personal piggy bank. I stood at the base of the limestone steps leading up to the HOA clubhouse, a sprawling McMansion perched on the hills of West Austin, Texas. The late afternoon sun baked the perfectly manicured lawns that could get you fined if a single blade dared grow a quarter-inch too long. Inside those double oak doors, the air would be chilled to a precise 68 degrees because Elaine liked her environment exactly like her rules: cold, preserved, and completely under her control. I smoothed the fabric of my simple navy dress, the one I'd bought off the rack 3 years ago and still wore because HOA fines for non-compliant curb appeal had eaten every spare dollar. It was the best thing I owned. Yet I knew the moment I crossed the threshold I'd look like the help compared to the Botoxed residents waiting inside. I took a breath, tasting the exhaust from the line of luxury SUVs idling in the circular drive, and walked up the steps. The grand foyer was already packed. A string quartet played something vaguely classical and expensive in the corner, drowned out by the clinking of crystal flutes and the low roar of polite, wealthy laughter that always sounded like they were measuring your grass length while pretending to like you. The scent of overpriced lilies and even more overpriced perfume hit me like a physical wall of HOA compliance. I navigated through the crowd, keeping my head down, trying to make myself as narrow as possible. I was an expert at being invisible in this neighborhood. Then I saw it suspended across the vaulted ceiling of the great room, glittering under the light of a chandelier that probably cost more than my annual dues. A massive banner. The letters were woven in gold silk, shimmering against a backdrop of royal blue velvet. Happy Leadership Year, Grant. I stopped dead in my tracks. My chest tightened. A familiar dull ache I'd grown used to over the last decade. Today was October 15th, my birthday. It was also technically the birthday of Grant Hargrove, the HOA treasurer and Elaine's golden boy son. We shared the date, but we did not share the day. Ever since Elaine had married the original developer and turned the HOA into her private empire, the 15th of October had stopped being about Vivian Parker. It had become a national holiday for Grant. I remembered my 25th birthday. I'd come home from my freelance writing gig, excited to share a cake I baked myself, only to find a notice taped to my door. $250 fine for unauthorized holiday decorations, and a note that the whole board had taken Grant to Paris for the weekend. I remembered my 30th, a milestone I spent eating a microwave dinner alone, while the HOA app showed photos of Elaine and Grant toasting on a rented yacht. Caption: celebrating our community visionary. They always had an excuse. Oh, Vivian, we thought you were working. Oh, Vivian, it slipped our minds with all the planning for the gala. Oh, Vivian, you know Grant needs this networking opportunity. They forgot. That was the official story. They were just too busy, too important, too wrapped up in maintaining property values, to remember the homeowner who didn't kiss the HOA ring. I looked at the banner again. Grant was turning 32 today. The golden boy, the heir to the Pinecrest Meadows throne now that the original developer was incapacitated in a nursing home. I watched him across the room, holding a scotch glass with the casual entitlement of a man who had never feared a single fine in his life. He was laughing at something a city councilman was saying, head thrown back, teeth white and perfect. I was about to turn around and leave. I had done my duty. I had shown my face. I could go back to my car, drive to the 24-hour diner on the highway, and order a slice of cherry pie. That was my tradition. But then my phone vibrated against my hip. It was the sharp, aggressive buzz of a security alert. I pulled it from my clutch, shielding the screen from the prying eyes of a woman in a sequined gown who was already judging my shoes. I unlocked it. The brightness stung my eyes. It was an email from the credit monitoring service I'd signed up for years ago. Alert. New credit inquiry and account opening. I frowned, tapping the notification. When the details loaded, the blood drained from my face so fast I felt dizzy. Loan approved home equity expansion. Principal amount, $180,000. Borrower, Vivian M. Parker. Date, October 15th. Status, dispersed. I stared at the numbers. $180,000. My hands started to shake. I did not apply for a loan. I did not own a business that required capital expansion. I worked as a freelance writer from a one-bedroom house that the HOA had already fined me into near bankruptcy. My credit score was decent but fragile, protected by my own obsessive frugality. The room seemed to tilt. The string quartet sounded like screeching tires. I looked up from the screen, eyes darting around the room. This had to be a mistake. Identity theft. A glitch. But then I saw Elaine. Elaine Hargrove was standing near the entrance to the West Wing corridor. A glass of champagne in one hand, her other hand resting lightly on the arm of the head groundskeeper, Mr. Henderson. She looked radiant in emerald green, a color she wore because she knew it made her eyes look predatory. She wasn't looking at the guests. She was looking at her watch. I slipped my phone back into my bag. My heart hammered. I needed to talk to her. I needed to tell her someone had stolen my identity. I began to weave through the crowd toward her. But before I could get close enough to call out, she turned and led Mr. Henderson into the quiet of the hallway, away from the noise of the party. Something in my gut, a primal instinct honed by years of walking on eggshells around her ridiculous covenants, told me to stop. Do not call out. Do not make a scene. Just listen. I moved to the edge of the hallway, pressing my back against the cool plaster, hidden by a large potted ficus that was probably measured daily to ensure uniform height compliance. Is everything prepared in the study? Elaine's voice drifted out, low and sharp. The sweetness she used for the residents was gone, replaced by the steel she used for business. Yes, madam. Mr. Henderson replied. The notary is waiting in the kitchen as you requested. He understands the need for discretion. Good, Elaine said. Keep the guests occupied if anyone asks. Grant is taking a private call from the developer investors. And put the files on the desk. The blue folder. Make sure the signature flags are already placed. And Ms. Parker? The groundskeeper asked. My breath hitched. She will be here, Elaine said with terrifying certainty. She never misses a chance to play the martyr. Just wait for her to arrive. Once she is in the house, guide her to the study immediately. The signing must be done before the cake is cut. The pieces slammed together in my mind with the force of a lean notice. They didn't just forget my birthday. They were banking on it. I waited until the hallway was clear. Then I stepped out. I didn't go back to the party. I walked silently down the corridor, past the portraits of founding residents, who looked down on me with painted disdain. I knew where the study was. It was the original developer's sanctuary, the one room in the clubhouse I used to feel safe in before the stroke took his voice. I pushed the heavy mahogany door open. The room was dim, lit only by the green banker's lamp on the massive oak desk. The air smelled of old paper and lemon polish, and there it was, sitting squarely in the center, the blue folder. I walked over to it, legs feeling like they were moving through quicksand. I opened the cover. The document on top was titled Community Settlement Agreement. It was thick, dense with legal ease. I flipped through the pages. I scanning for my name. I found it on page 4, paragraph 7. Vivian M. Parker agrees to irrevocably transfer all beneficial interest in the Pinecrest Meadows HOA voting rights, specifically the founder proxy shares allocated to her by the original developer in 2015. I blinked. Shares. Proxy rights. I had never been told I had any special voting power. I didn't even know such a thing existed in my name. I turned the page. Underneath was another document. A home equity loan application. It was the paperwork for the $180,000. My eyes widened as I saw the signature at the bottom. It was my name. It was my handwriting, the loop of the V, the sharp cross of the T. It was perfect. But I had never seen this paper before in my life. "You're early." The voice came from the doorway. I jumped, spinning around. Grant was standing there. He had slipped into the room without me hearing. He closed the door behind him, the latch clicking with a sound that felt final. He wasn't smiling his city council charming smile anymore. He looked bored. He walked over to the sidebar and poured himself another drink, the ice clinking against the glass. "Happy birthday, Viv," he said, taking a sip. He gestured loosely to the papers on the desk. "I see you found your present. What is this, Grant?" My voice was trembling, but I forced it to steady. I held up the loan application. "What did you do?" "Oh, relax," Grant said, waving a hand dismissively. "It's just bridge financing. We needed a little liquidity to cover some overhead before the quarter closes. My credit is leveraged to the hilt with the new pool renovation, and Mom's assets are tied up in the conservatorship for the old man. You were the only clean slate left. You took out a loan in my name," I whispered. $180,000. "That is a felony, Grant." "It's only a felony if you complain," he said, walking toward the desk. He set his drink down on a coaster. "But you won't, because you're going to sign that other document, the transfer, and the HOA will pay off the loan as part of the redevelopment costs. It's an accounting trick. Viv, don't hurt your head trying to understand the covenants." He picked up a heavy fountain pen from the desk and held it out to me. "Just sign the transfer," he said. "Release the proxy rights. The loan gets paid off tomorrow. You walk away clean. We get the votes we need to approve the developer buyout." "And if I don't?" I asked. The door opened again. Elaine swept in. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Then you're responsible for the debt, darling," Elaine said pleasantly, as if she were discussing the weather. She walked over to Grant and adjusted his lapel, picking off a microscopic piece of lint. "The loan is already in your name. The money has been wired to a vendor account we control. If you don't sign the proxy transfer, we won't release the funds to pay back the bank. You will be $180,000 in debt with no way to pay it. You will go bankrupt. You will lose that little house you love so much. Your credit will be ruined for 7 years." She turned to look at me. Her face was a mask of maternal concern, but her eyes were dead. "We are trying to help you, Vivian," she said. "We protected you from these burdens for years. The old developer gave you those proxy rights a long time ago, but they are useless to you. They are non-voting in practice. They don't pay dividends. They are just paper. Grant needs them to secure the community's future." "You forged my signature," I said. It wasn't a question. "We expedited the process," Elaine corrected, "because we knew you would want to help the community. You always want to help, don't you?" She took the pen from Grant and placed it in my hand. Her fingers were cold. "Sign it, Vivian," she commanded softly. "The notary is waiting to stamp it. Then you can go out there, have a glass of champagne, and eat some cake. Grant's cake is lemon raspberry this year, your favorite." I looked down at the pen. It was a Mont Blanc, Heavy black resin. I looked at the papers, the community settlement agreement, the proxy transfer, the fraudulent loan. They had planned this perfectly. They waited for today. They waited for the one day of the year when I felt the most desperate for connection, the most pathetic, the most willing to take any crumb of approval they threw at me. They thought I was weak. They thought I was the same little homeowner who used to cry because her lawn measurement notice arrived without a single candle. I looked at Grant. He was checking his reflection in the window, adjusting his hair. He didn't even consider me a threat. I was just a signature to him, a hurdle to be stepped over. I looked at Elaine. She was watching me with that suffocating expectation, the look that said, "Do as you are told and maybe I will reduce your fine." I gripped the pen. I lowered my head, letting my shoulders slump. I needed them to see what they expected to see. The defeated homeowner. "If I sign," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "If I sign, what do I get?" Grant scoffed. "You get to leave without a debt that will crush you. Consider it a birthday gift." "That is not what she means, Grant," Elaine said. She stepped closer, her perfume clouding my senses. She put a hand on my shoulder. Felt heavy, like a lean. "You get peace, Vivian," Elaine said sweetly. "You get to go back to your quiet life. You don't have to worry about covenants or special assessments or lawsuits. You get to be free of all this responsibility. You need peace. You were never built for this neighborhood. Honey, you were never built for this neighborhood." The words echoed in my head. She was right. I wasn't built for their world. Their world was built on lies, on theft, on the cannibalization of their own residents. But she was wrong about one thing. She thought I wanted peace. I looked down at the signature line. Vivian M. Parker. I didn't want peace. Not anymore. I uncapped the pen. I leaned over the desk. "Okay," I said softly. "I'll sign." I pressed the nib to the paper, but I didn't sign my name. Not yet. I made a small mark, a tiny scratch of ink that looked like an accidental slip of the hand. Right on the edge of the signature block, a mark that would be imperceptible to them, but glaringly obvious to a forensic document examiner. Then I signed. I made my signature slightly shaky, slightly off-axis, the signature of a woman under duress. "Good girl," Elaine breathed. She snatched the paper away the second I lifted the pen. "See, was that so hard, Mr. Henderson?" she called out. The groundskeeper appeared instantly. "Take these to the notary in the kitchen. Tell him to seal them immediately." Grant clapped me on the back. It was a hard, patronizing slap. "Thanks, Viv. You really saved the community. Grab a drink on your way out." They turned their backs on me. They went back to discussing the developer investors, their voices blending together, already forgetting I was in the room. I stood there for a moment, clutching my purse. The loan notification on my phone was still glowing in the darkness of my bag. $180,000. I turned and walked out of the study. I walked back down the corridor, past the party, past the gold banner that screamed, "Happy Leadership Year, Grant." I stepped out into the humid Austin night. The valet brought my car around. A 10-year-old sedan that squeaked when it braked. As I sat in the driver's seat, I looked back at the clubhouse. It was glowing like a lantern on the hill. Beautiful, majestic, rotten to the core. They thought they had won. They thought they had tied up the loose end. They thought that, by choosing my birthday for their crime, they had caught me at my most vulnerable. I put the car in gear. They didn't forget my birthday. They chose it because they thought on this day I would be too weak to fight back. I looked into the rearview mirror. My eyes weren't wet. They were dry. They were clear. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small notebook. I opened it to a fresh page and wrote down one thing. October 15th. The day the interest starts accruing. They forgot one thing about me. I am my mother's daughter, too. And I know how to hold a grudge until it pays out. I drove away, leaving the lights of the gala behind me in the dust. The trap was set. They had just walked right into it. I drove until the lights of the Pinecrest Meadows clubhouse were nothing more than a blurred constellation in my rearview mirror. I did not go home. My house was too quiet, and silence is dangerous when your mind is racing at 100 miles an hour. Instead, I pulled into the empty parking lot of a 24-hour pharmacy, killed the engine, and let the darkness settle around me. This was part of the ritual. The location changed. Sometimes it was a park overlooking the river, sometimes a diner with flickering neon signs, but the essence remained the same. For the last decade, my birthday had been a study in solitude. I closed my eyes and pictured the ghost of birthdays past. They played out like a reel of low-budget indie films. There was my 26th, where I sat in this very car, eating a single vanilla cupcake I had bought from the discount bakery rack for $2. The frosting had been hard and tasted like chemical sugar. I had lit a match, watched it burn down until it stung my fingertips, and whispered a wish that I no longer remembered. 5 miles away, the sky had erupted in red and gold. I could hear the distant booms of the fireworks display Elaine had commissioned for Grant. They were celebrating his 24th. He had wanted a masquerade theme that year. I remembered seeing the photos later on the HOA app. Grant wearing a silk mask, holding court with a bottle of champagne that cost more than my monthly dues. Me alone in a sedan, wiping frosting off my lip with a fast food napkin. People often asked me, usually with a look of pity that made my skin crawl, why I stayed. Why did I keep paying the dues? Why did I answer the phone when Elaine called? Why didn't I just pack a bag, move to Seattle or New York, and change my address? It was a fair question. The answer was pathetic in its simplicity. I stayed because I was waiting for the miracle. I was waiting for the moment when the script would flip. I held on to a childish, stubborn hope that one day the original developer would wake up and see how Grant was bleeding the HOA dry. I hoped that Elaine would drop the facade and remember that I was a resident, not just her compliance scapegoat. I stayed because leaving felt like admitting that they had won, that they had successfully driven me out of my own neighborhood. And if I was being honest with myself, I stayed for her, for Elaine. It was a twisted form of loyalty. I knew that her position in the HOA was precarious. She was the second wife, the younger wife, the one the old money whispered about behind their manicured hands. If I caused a scene, if I became the angry homeowner who sold her story to the local news, Elaine would be the one to pay the price. Grant would use it against her. I absorbed the fines so she wouldn't have to absorb the blame. But Grant, thinking of him, made my grip on the steering wheel tighten until my knuckles turned white. Grant Hargrove, the Prince of Pinecrest Meadows. He was a man who had never heard the word no without a lawyer present to dismantle it. He was 2 years younger than me, but he walked through the world with the heavy, unearned confidence of a man who believes gravity bends to his will. I remembered a summer afternoon 4 years ago. Grant had crashed his new golf cart into a neighbor's retaining wall. He had been drunk. It was 2 in the afternoon. I was the one who drove out to pick him up because he didn't want to call the board. When I got there, he was leaning against the wreckage, smoking a cigarette, looking bored. "Are you hurt?" I had asked. "Terrified?" He had laughed, flicking ash onto the ruined hood of a $10,000 machine. "Relax, Viv. That is why we have insurance. That is how the HOA works. You break it, you write a check, you get a new one." That was his mantra. That is how the HOA works to Grant. Residents were just like lawns. If you broke them, you just wrote a fine or signed a document and they were fixed or replaced. But the dynamic had shifted 6 weeks ago. That was when the ground beneath us finally cracked. The original developer, The man who had built Pinecrest Meadows from a regional plot into a gated empire had suffered a stroke. It was classified as mild by the doctors, but the effects were immediate. His speech was slurred. His right side was weak, and for the first time in his life, he was not in the driver's seat. The sharks did not wait for the blood to hit the water. They were already circling. Elaine had panicked. She was terrified of the board ousting the family. So she pushed for Grant. She lobbied. She charmed. She threatened. And she won. Grant was named interim treasurer while the old man recovered. It was supposed to be temporary, but give a man like Grant a crown, even a temporary one, and he will glue it to his scalp. I reached for my phone, the screen glowing in the dark car. I navigated to my call log. There it was, 10 o'clock this morning. Mom. That call had been the bait. I had been sitting at my kitchen table, drinking coffee, trying to ignore the date on the calendar, when the phone rang. Vivian, Elaine had said. Her voice was breathless.
Urgent.
I am at the clubhouse. The old developer is asking for you. My heart had skipped a beat. The old developer and I had a complicated relationship. He wasn't my father, and he was often distant, but he was fair. He had paid for my college. He remembered to ask about my job in a house of vipers. He was at worst a garden snake. Since the stroke, I had been kept at arm's length. He is asking for me, I repeated. Is he okay? He is agitated, Elaine said. He keeps trying to say your name. He wants to see you today on your birthday. I think he has a gift for you. Please come by the gala early, but try to visit him at the care facility first. He was transferred to Whispering Pines for rehab yesterday. I will go right now, I had said. I fell for it. I fell for it because I wanted to believe that someone in this neighborhood remembered me with kindness. I drove straight to Whispering Pines. It was an ultra-exclusive rehabilitation center, the kind of place that looked more like a 5-star resort than a hospital. The lobby smelled of eucalyptus and fresh linen. I walked up to the reception desk, clutching a small bag of books I thought the old developer might like. I am here to see the original developer, I told the receptionist, a woman with a smile so practiced it looked painful. I am his former neighbor, Vivian Parker. The receptionist tapped on her keyboard. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. I am sorry, Ms. Parker, she said. Mr. Benton is not accepting visitors at this time. Elaine just called me, I argued. She said he asked for me. I have the current visitation protocol right here, the woman said, turning the screen slightly away from me. It was updated this morning by his power of attorney. No visitors outside of the immediate medical team and approved legal counsel. The family list has been restricted. I am family, I said, my voice rising. Your name is not on the list. Ma'am, she said. Her voice was final. The list was updated at 8 o'clock this morning by Mr. Grant Hargrove. I had stood there humiliated, holding my bag of books. Grant had blocked me. Elaine had sent me on a fool's errand. But why? At the time, I thought it was just cruelty. I thought Grant just wanted to deny me a moment with the old developer. I thought Elaine had lied to get me to the gala later. Now, sitting in my car in the pharmacy parking lot, the pieces were starting to rearrange themselves into a picture I hadn't seen before. I unlocked my phone again and opened my email. I needed to look at that second notification, the one that had come in right after the loan alert while I was standing in the shadows of the hallway. I scrolled past the spam and the work emails until I found it. Subject: Quarterly Compliance Action Required. Pinecrest Meadows Community Fund. I frowned. The community fund was their charitable arm. They used it to throw galas and write off taxes. I had absolutely nothing to do with it. I had never attended a meeting. I had never voted on a grant. I opened the email. Dear Board Secretary, This is an automated reminder that your digital signature is required for the release of the Q3 grant allocations. Please log into the portal to finalize the transfers. Board Secretary. I stared at the words. I was the secretary of the Pinecrest Meadows Community Fund since when? I searched my memory for every paper Elaine had ever shoved in front of me. Just sign this, honey. It is for the insurance. Just sign this, Viv. It is for the gate maintenance. I tapped on the sender's details. It was a legitimate automated system used by nonprofits. This wasn't a phishing scam. This was real. My mind flashed back to the loan document I had seen on the desk an hour ago. The $180,000. Grant had said they needed liquidity. He said my credit was a clean slate. But it wasn't just the loan. If I was the secretary of the fund, that meant I was an officer. That meant I had legal responsibilities. That meant if money was missing or if money was being moved illegally, my name was on the approval line. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I looked at the date of the email, October 15th. I looked at the date of the loan approval, October 15th. I thought about the last 10 years. Every year on my birthday, there was a crisis or a gala or a trip. There was always a reason why I couldn't be present or why I had to be rushed. Oh, Vivian, just sign the card for the new gate before you go. Vivian, we need you to sign for this package. We are running late for the airport. Vivian, leave your driver's license with me. I need to update our insurance policy while you are away. They didn't forget my birthday. They loved my birthday. It was their favorite day of the year. Because on my birthday, I was emotional. I was distracted. I was desperate for their approval. I was the path of least resistance. And more importantly, on my birthday, everyone else was looking at Grant. The cameras were on him. The guests were surrounding him. The noise was all directed at him. In the shadow of his spotlight, in the quiet corners of the clubhouse while the band played and the champagne popped, they were using my hand to write their reality. I lowered the phone. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, but it sounded like a choke. They had turned me into a ghost to the world. Vivian Parker was a nobody, the quiet homeowner, the one who didn't quite fit the aesthetic. But on paper, I was apparently the busiest woman in Texas. I was taking out home equity loans. I was managing charitable funds. I was transferring proxy rights. They had built a second Vivian, a Vivian made of ink and fraud, and they kept her in a file cabinet, pulling her out once a year to take the fall for whatever risks they didn't want to carry themselves. They didn't just forget me, I whispered to the empty car. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face was pale, my eyes dark holes in the gloom. They erased me. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about the $180,000. It was about the complete and total dehumanization of my existence. To Elaine and Grant, I wasn't a person with dreams or feelings or a birthday. I was a resource. I was a shell homeowner with a pulse. I thought about the old developer in that nursing home. Was he isolated because he was sick, or was he isolated because he was the only one who knew? He had tried to warn me. Elaine said he was agitated. She said he was trying to say my name. Don't sign. That was probably what he was trying to say. I looked at the dashboard clock. It was 9:30 at night. The gala would be peaking right now. Grant would be cutting the lemon raspberry cake. Elaine would be making a toast about community values. I reached into the back seat and pulled out the grocery bag I had bought earlier that day before everything fell apart. Inside was a small 4-inch chocolate cake from the supermarket bakery. I opened the plastic container. The frosting was smashed against the lid. I didn't have a candle. I stuck my finger into the frosting and took a swipe. Tasted like vegetable oil and cheap cocoa. Happy birthday, Vivian, I said. My voice was steady, cold. They had spent 10 years turning my birthday into a crime scene. They thought this year would be the same. They thought I would go home, cry into my pillow, and wait for next year. But they had made a mistake. They had forgotten that ghosts are the hardest things to kill. And when you force someone to live in the shadows for long enough, they learn how to see in the dark. I started the car. I wasn't going home to sleep. I had work to do. If they wanted to play games with paperwork, they were about to learn that I was the one who held the pen. They had turned the day I was born into the day I disappeared. But tomorrow was going to be the day I finally showed up. I pulled my car out of the pharmacy lot and turned away from the highway, heading toward the older tree-lined streets of Tarrytown. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was vibrating with a frequency I had never felt before. It was the hum of adrenaline, the cold clarity that comes after the initial wave of shock recedes. I had one destination in mind. There was only one person in Austin who knew the Pinecrest Meadows finances as intimately as they knew their own secrets. And more importantly, she was the only person who had ever looked at me without seeing a nuisance. Loretta Shaw. Loretta was 71 years old, a retired senior compliance officer who had managed the covenants of half the old money HOAs in Texas before she cashed out. She had been best friends with the original developer's mother, my step-grandmother figure, and she had always possessed a sharp, unsentimental kindness that terrified Elaine. Her house was a mid-century bungalow hidden behind a wall of overgrown jasmine. The lights were still on. I checked the time. It was nearly 10:30. Loretta was a night owl, a habit she had picked up from 40 years of reading covenants while the rest of the world slept. I knocked on the solid oak door. A moment later, the porch light flicked on and the door swung open. Loretta stood there wrapped in a cashmere cardigan, holding a glass of red wine. Her silver hair was cut in a sharp bob, and her eyes, magnified by thick tortoiseshell glasses, narrowed as she looked at me. "Vivian," she said, her voice gravelly and warm. She didn't ask why I was there. She didn't ask why I looked like I had just escaped a citation. She simply stepped back and opened the door wider. "You're late. I expected you 2 hours ago." I stepped inside, the scent of old books and expensive candles wrapping around me. "You expected me. I saw the alert on the legacy server this morning," Loretta said, walking toward her living room. She gestured for me to sit on the leather sofa. "I may be retired, Vivian, but I still have my keys to the kingdom. I still consult for the bank that holds the Pinecrest Meadows Community Fund accounts. And when I saw a compliance flag pop up with your name on it, I knew it was only a matter of time before you showed up on my doorstep." She sat down opposite me and placed a laptop on the coffee table. She spun it around so I could see the screen. "Happy birthday, by the way," she said dryly. I assumed the gala was the usual display of narcissism. "It was," I said, leaning forward to look at the screen. "Loretta, what am I looking at?" "You are looking at the reason you are going to need a very expensive lawyer," she said. The screen displayed a spreadsheet. It was a ledger for the Pinecrest Meadows Community Fund. Rows and rows of numbers. "The fund is supposed to be a charitable vehicle," Loretta explained, her finger tracing a line on the screen. "Tax-exempt status, strict oversight, but 3 days ago, the internal audit system flagged a series of transactions as high risk." "Do you know why?" I shook my head. "Because the authorizing officer for these transactions was listed as Vivian M. Parker, board secretary." I felt the blood drain from my face again. The same sensation I had felt at the gala. "I am not the board secretary, Loretta. I didn't even know I was on the board." "I know that," Loretta said sharply. "And you know that, but the IRS doesn't know that. According to the minutes filed 2 years ago, you were voted in. Your digital signature has been approving grants every quarter since then." She clicked a folder, opening a scanned document. There it was again, my signature identical to the one on the loan application I had seen earlier. "They are using me," I whispered. They are doing more than using you. Honey, Loretta said. They are washing money through you. She typed a few keys and brought up a new window. It showed a list of vendors. Companies that the fund had paid for services. Look at these names, she said. Luminous Landscaping, Apex Maintenance Group, Terra Firma Security. They sound impressive, don't they? The fund paid these three companies a combined total of $400,000 over the last 18 months for consulting fees and logistical support. So, I asked, they throw big galas. Grant loves galas. Vivian, look closer, Loretta commanded. I squinted at the addresses listed for the companies. Luminous Landscaping, 1402 Willow Creek Drive, Suite 404. Apex Maintenance Group, 1402 Willow Creek Drive, Suite 404. Terra Firma Security, 1402 Willow Creek Drive, Suite 404. They are all the same address, I said. And do you know what is at 1402 Willow Creek Drive? Loretta asked. It is a strip mall next to a dry cleaner. Suite 404 is a private mailbox rental store. I had a friend drive by this afternoon. These companies don't exist. Vivian, they are shell vendors, ghost ships. The realization hit me with a sickening thud. They are taking money out of the fund, paying it to themselves through these fake companies, and using my signature to approve the payments. Correct, Loretta said. It is classic embezzlement. But here is the thing. They are getting sloppy. Usually Elaine is meticulous, but lately the amounts are getting larger. The frequency is increasing. It is desperate. They are looting the ship before it sinks, and they are making sure that when the auditors finally come knocking, the person holding the pen is you. I sat back, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. It wasn't just the loan. The loan was just quick cash. This was systemic. This was a prison sentence waiting to happen. Why? I asked, my voice cracking. Why me? Why not just use a random identity? Because you are resident enough to have access, but distant enough to be disposable, Loretta said brutally. And because they own your data, Vivian. Check your credit report again. Not just the alerts. Check the open revolving accounts. I pulled out my phone. My fingers were cold. I navigated to the full report, scrolling past the loan notification that had started this nightmare. I looked at the active credit card section. There, buried under my student loans and my old car note, was a card I didn't recognize. MX Business Platinum, opened 9 months ago. Credit limit $50,000. Current balance $48,000. Status, past due. $48,000. I whispered. I clicked on the account details. I wanted to see the application. I wanted to see how they had done it. The bank's portal allowed me to view the original uploaded documents used for identity verification. Took a moment to download. When the image popped up on my tiny screen, I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to close my eyes. It was a photocopy of my driver's license. But it wasn't my current license. It was the one I had 3 years ago, the one where I had blonde highlights, and I knew exactly when that photocopy had been taken. 3 years ago, I said, my voice hollow. We were going to the Aspen rental for Christmas. Elaine said she wanted to keep all our passports and IDs in the master safe so we wouldn't lose them while we were skiing. She kept my wallet for the whole week. I looked up at Loretta. She didn't just keep it safe. She copied it. She scanned everything. The memory was so vivid it hurt. I remembered feeling grateful at the time. I remembered thinking, wow, the president is really looking out for me. I had handed over my identity with a smile, thanking her for being so thoughtful. She has been planning this for years, I said. She has been stockpiling my identity like ammunition. She is a survivalist. Vivian, Loretta said, taking a sip of her wine. And in her world, survival means having a fall guy. She knew the original developer's health was declining. She knew Grant wasn't capable of running the HOA legitimately. She needed an escape hatch. You are the escape hatch. I stood up and paced the small living room. The betrayal was no longer a sharp knife. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. Covered everything. Every happy birthday text. Every community meeting. Every moment of kindness over the last decade had been a lie. They were just maintaining the asset. They were just keeping the livestock healthy until slaughter. I need to go to the police, I said. No, Loretta said sharply. You go to the police now and you are walking into an interrogation room with a target on your back. You signed those papers tonight, didn't you? The ones at the gala. I stopped pacing. Yes, but I signed them under duress. Can you prove that? Loretta asked. Or will it look like a guilty woman trying to cover her tracks after realizing the audit was coming? Elaine has better lawyers than the police department has investigators. If you go in there unprepared, she will spin a story that you were the mastermind, that you took advantage of your sick former neighbor and your trusting treasurer. She will have emails, texts, and witness statements from her staff painting you as unstable and greedy. So, what do? I asked. I can't just let them ruin me. No, Loretta said. She stood up and walked over to a bookshelf. She pulled out a thick leather binder. You don't let them ruin you. You ruin them. But you don't do it with emotions, Vivian. You don't do it with tears. You do it with paper. She handed me a business card. It was heavy cream-colored cardstock. Miles Keaton, forensic accounting, corporate litigation. Miles is the best in the state, Loretta said. He hates the Hargroves. The old developer screwed him on a land deal 20 years ago. He has been waiting for an excuse to look inside their books for 2 decades. Is he expensive? I asked, thinking of my bank account, which held less than $3,000. He is very expensive, Loretta said. But I have already called him. He is taking the case on contingency. He wants the kill, not the hourly rate. She pointed to the door. He is waiting at his office downtown. Go to him. Take everything you have. The emails, the screenshots, the loan number. Tell him everything. I looked at the card, then back at Loretta. Why are you helping me? You were friends with the old developer's mother. You are part of their circle. Loretta's expression softened just for a fraction of a second. The old developer's mother was a good woman. She knew what Elaine was the moment she met her. She told me once, that woman will find her own residence if she gets hungry enough. I didn't believe her then. I believe her now. She reached out and squeezed my hand. Her grip was iron strong. Go, she said. And Vivian, stop acting like the victim. Victims get pity. You need power. I left Loretta's house with the business card burning a hole in my pocket. The drive downtown felt different. I wasn't driving away from something anymore. I was driving toward a weapon. Miles Keaton's office was in a glass high-rise that overlooked the Colorado River. The lobby was empty, but the security guard had my name on a list. I took the elevator to the 35th floor. The office was stark, modern, and intimidating. Miles Keaton was waiting for me in a conference room that seemed to float above the city lights. He was a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and eyes that looked like they could scan a barcode from across the room. He didn't offer me a drink. He didn't offer me sympathy. He pointed to the chair opposite him. Loretta briefed me, he said. His voice was a low baritone, devoid of wasted syllables. Show me what you have. I laid it all out. The loan notification, the community fund email, the credit card report, the story of the gala, the signature I had altered at the last second. Miles listened in silence. He read the documents I pulled up on my phone. He made notes on a yellow legal pad. When I was done, I sat back, exhausted. They hate me, I said quietly. I always knew they didn't like me, but I didn't think they hated me enough to do this. Miles stopped writing. He looked up at me, capping his pen with a sharp click. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on the glass table. You are looking at this wrong, Ms. Parker, he said. How else can I look at it? I asked. They stole my identity. They stole my credit. They stole my life. Hate is an emotion, Miles said. Hate implies passion. It implies that they think about you. But looking at this file, he tapped the legal pad with his finger. This isn't hate. This is logistics. To them, you are not a person they dislike. You are an asset class. You are a resource they are mining. You are no different to them than a plot of land or a tax loophole. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city where the Hargrove family was currently toasting to their success. Vivian, he said, turning back to me, his silhouette framed by the skyline. This isn't a story about a neighborhood that hates you. This is a story about a neighborhood that is using you as human collateral. And the only way to deal with people who treat you like a commodity is to become a liability they can't afford. He walked back to the table and slid a retainer agreement toward me. They want to use your name? He asked, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. Fine. Let's make sure that by the time we are done, the name Vivian Parker is the most expensive thing they ever touched. I looked at the agreement. I picked up the pen. For the second time that night, I prepared to sign my name, but this time, my hand didn't shake. Where do we start? I asked. We start by constructing the timeline. I need every date, every birthday, every forgotten gala for the last 10 years because I guarantee you every time they forgot you, they remembered to visit the bank. The fluorescent lights of Miles Keaton's conference room hummed with a low electric buzz that seemed to match the vibration in my skull. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. The city of Austin was asleep. But inside this glass box on the 35th floor, time had suspended. We were not sleeping. We were dissecting the last 10 years of my life. Miles stood before a massive whiteboard that spanned the entire length of the wall. He held a black marker like a weapon. Again, he said, his voice devoid of fatigue. Go back to your 27th birthday, October 15th, 7 years ago. Where were you? I rubbed my eyes trying to pull the memory from the fog. I was in the hospital, I said quietly. I had severe food poisoning. I spent the night in the emergency room getting fluids. And the board? Miles asked, writing ER visit on the board under the year column. They were hosting a charity gala for the outcome of the local elections. I recalled Grant was the honorary chair. Elaine sent flowers to the hospital the next day. Miles turned to the table where Loretta was buried behind a fortress of file boxes and open laptops. Loretta, check the community fund ledger for that week. Look for expedited service fees or emergency vendor payments. Loretta typed furiously. The clicking of her mechanical keyboard was the only sound in the room for a long minute. Here, she said. Her voice was sharp. October 16th. Payment of $12,500 to Apex Maintenance. Marked as Crisis Management Retainer. Approved by Board Secretary Vivian Parker. Miles drew a red line connecting my hospital visit to the payment. You were incapacitated, Miles said. You were physically unable to sign anything or access a computer. Perfect cover. If anyone asked later, they could say you handled it remotely while recovering. Go to 30, I said, a sudden memory surfacing with painful clarity. My 30th birthday, they told me they were taking me to dinner. But at the last minute, Elaine called. She said there was a plumbing emergency at the clubhouse, and she needed me to drive out there to meet the contractor because she was tied up. Did you go? Miles asked. Yes. I sat in an empty house for 4 hours. The contractor never showed up. When I drove back, the service entrance to the main clubhouse was blocked by catering trucks. They were throwing a surprise casino night for Grant. Loretta didn't wait for the prompt. She was already scrolling. October 15th. 4 years ago, a wire transfer of $22,000 to Luminous Landscaping. Description: infrastructure maintenance. It is a pattern, Miles said, stepping back to look at the board. The whiteboard was now a spiderweb of red ink. On the left were my memories: lonely nights, sudden errands, convenient illnesses, urgent requests to handle community crises. On the right were the financial extractions, thousands upon thousands of dollars flowing out of the Pinecrest Meadows accounts. They used my schedule against me, I said, staring at the board. Every time they needed to move money, they created a distraction to ensure I was physically absent but digitally present. It is smarter than that, Miles corrected. They created a narrative. If an auditor ever interviewed the residents would say, "Oh yes, Vivian was handling the clubhouse issue that day." It creates a plausible alibi for why you might have been working. You were handling business. But who is the architect? Loretta asked. She pulled a sheet of paper from the printer. Grant is arrogant, but he doesn't have the patience for this kind of detail. This requires administrative obsession. She slid the paper across the polished mahogany table toward me. I did a deep dive on North Shore Celebrations LLC. That is the vendor that received the largest payout last year. $50,000 for holiday decor logistics. The company is registered in Delaware, which usually hides the owner, but they made a mistake. I looked at the document. It was a domain registration form for the company's website. Look at the recovery email, Loretta pointed out. I scanned the lines until I saw it. Emmer88@protonmail.com. My stomach turned over. Emmer was Elaine's maiden name, and 88 was the year she married my father long before she met the old developer. It is Mom, I whispered. The realization didn't feel like a surprise. It felt like a confirmation of a sickness I had always suspected but was too afraid to diagnose. Grant is the face. He spends the money. He enjoys the lifestyle. But Elaine is the one moving the chess pieces. She is not just standing between you and the neighborhood, Miles said, capping his marker. She is the one holding the knife. She set up the shell companies. She registered the domains. Grant is just the beneficiary. Elaine is the operator. I felt a sudden violent urge to throw up. All those years she told me she was trying to keep the peace. All those times she whispered that Grant was difficult and I just needed to be patient. She wasn't protecting me from Grant. She was managing me for Grant. We have the timeline, Miles said, breaking my spiral. We have the fraudulent vendors. We have the link to Elaine. But it is not enough. Not enough, I asked, my voice rising. Miles, they stole $500,000 using my name. And they have a digital paper trail spanning 10 years that says you authorized every cent of it, Miles countered. If we take this to a civil court, it becomes a messy neighborhood dispute. They will say you are a disgruntled homeowner who went rogue. They will say you set up North Shore Celebrations yourself to embezzle money and now you are trying to frame your president. So we need criminal charges, Loretta said. Miles nodded. He picked up his phone. I am calling the Attorney General's office, specifically the Financial Crimes Division. I have a contact there who owes me a favor. An hour later, the sun was beginning to bleed gray light through the windows. The door to the conference room opened and a woman walked in. She looked like she had been awake for as long as we had, but she wore her fatigue like armor. She was dressed in a sharp charcoal suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. Vivian, this is Special Agent Tessa Carver, Miles said. Tessa didn't smile. She didn't offer a handshake. She walked straight to the whiteboard and studied the web of red lines for a full minute. Then she turned to me. Her eyes were piercing, assessing me not as a victim, but as a potential witness or a suspect. Miles says you are the key, Tessa said. Her voice was dry and professional. I am, I said. This is clean work, Tessa said, gesturing to the documents Loretta had spread out. The digital signatures are authentic. The walk from the library to the grand ballroom was less than 50 feet, but in my mind it spanned a decade. The hallway was lined with mirrors, and as I passed them, flanked by Grant and Elaine, I didn't see a neighborhood. I saw a security escort. They were marching me to the slaughter, terrified that, if they let go of my arm for even a second, I would run. But I wasn't running. I was processing the vibration against my ribs. The rapid-fire series of messages Miles had sent to my phone while I was locked in the bathroom. I had told him they admitted everything. He had replied, "Then you need to know why." I kept my eyes forward, fixing a plastic smile on my face for the benefit of the waiters passing by with trays of champagne. But my mind was back in that digital file Miles had just shared. It was a scanned document from 10 years ago dug up from the deepest archives of the Pinecrest Meadows HOA legal history. It was a deed of trust beneficiary Vivian M. Parker, asset 12% voting proxy in Pinecrest Meadows HOA. Class A rights condition of transfer upon graduation from university. I felt a lump rise in my throat that had nothing to do with fear. The original developer, who I thought had simply tolerated me, had actually secured my future the day I put on my cap and gown. He had given me 12% proxy power. 12% was a specific number. In HOA law, anything over 10% usually granted the homeowner veto power over major redevelopment events. He hadn't just given me a voice. He had given me a shield. And then I read the addendum Miles had highlighted in the PDF. Clause 4. The existence of this trust shall remain confidential from all other parties, specifically Grant Hargrove, until the beneficiary reaches the age of 35 or upon the incapacitation of the original developer, to ensure the beneficiary's independence is not compromised by familial pressure. He knew. The old developer had known even 10 years ago that Grant would try to eat me alive. He had hidden the rights to protect me. But he had made one mistake. He had trusted his wife. He had trusted Elaine to be the executive of that silence. Instead, she had weaponized it. As we reached the edge of the ballroom, the noise of the gala washed over us. A wall of jazz music and laughter. Grant tightened his grip on my elbow. "Smile, Viv," he hissed. "You are about to be a hero." I didn't look at him. I was thinking about the second document Miles had sent. A discovery Loretta had made only minutes ago. It was an archived email chain between Elaine and the HOA's former chief of operations. Subject: Annual schedule October 15th from E. Hargrove. Date: 7 years ago. Regarding the event for Grant, ensure the timeline is pushed back. The cake cutting must not happen before 9. Vivian will arrive at 7. She never stays longer than an hour if the crowd is too large. We need the clubhouse fully occupied and chaotic. Once she leaves, we can proceed with the proxy signatures for the fiscal year close. Do not schedule the notary until she is off the property. We need plausible deniability that she was unavailable to sign in person. I stopped walking. Grant stumbled slightly, pulled up short by my sudden halt. "What are you doing? Move." I stood there staring at the back of a woman in a red dress who was laughing at a joke. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, shattering the last remnant of the little girl who just wanted her president to like her. They didn't forget my birthday for 10 years. I had cried over the fact that they forgot. I had internalized it as a sign of my own insignificance. I thought I was so forgettable, so unlovable, that the date of my birth simply slipped their minds because Grant's celebration was more important. But it wasn't negligence. It was strategy. They needed my birthday. It was the linchpin of their entire fraud. They knew that on October 15th, I would come to the clubhouse desperate for connection. They knew I would feel out of place in the lavish gala for Grant. They knew I would leave early, heartbroken and alone. And that gap, That specific window of time between my departure and midnight was when they worked. They used my unavailability to justify signing on my behalf. Vivian was here, but she had to leave. She authorized us to handle this. My pain was their alibi. My heartbreak was their operational procedure. Vivian, Elaine whispered harshly, leaning in close. People are staring. What is wrong with you? I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the fine lines around her mouth, the tension in her neck. I didn't see a president anymore. I saw a project manager who was worried her schedule was slipping. Nothing is wrong, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Calm, detached, dangerous. I just realized something. Realize it later, Grant snapped. The buyers are at the main table. I realized, I continued, ignoring him, that you must have really hated buying 2 cakes every year. Elaine blinked, confused. What? You had to buy Grant's cake, I said. And then you had to buy a second one for the staff to eat after I left. Just so you could say I was there for the cutting. That is a lot of wasted sugar. Mother. Elaine's face went white. She knew that I knew. Keep walking, she said, her voice trembling with a sudden, inexplicable fear. We resumed our march. My phone buzzed again. It was Tessa. Status update. We have eyes on the wire. A transfer of $52 million has been queued from the community fund account to a shell bank in the Cayman Islands. It is in pending status. It is waiting for the upload of the unanimous proxy consent form. That is what they need you to sign. If that form hits the server, the money vanishes. $52 million. That was the price of the neighborhood. That was the price of the old developer's legacy. And they were going to funnel it all through the fund to avoid taxes, leaving the HOA hollowed out and me holding the bag for the illegal transfer. Grant thought I was going to sign a transfer of proxy rights. He thought he was just buying me out. He didn't know that I knew the transaction was already staged in the banking system. If I signed that paper on the table, I wasn't just giving up my rights. I was pulling the trigger on a $52 million theft. I looked at the stage. A microphone stand was set up for toasts. The partners, 3 men in dark suits who looked like they were made of shark skin, were standing near the front, swirling their drinks. Grant leaned in. Here is the play. We go up there. I announce the merger. I introduce you. You say you are so proud of your big brother and that you are happy to step aside to let the vision continue. Then you sign the paper on the table. Simple. Don't improvise. And the notary? I asked. Darren is right there. Grant pointed to the side of the stage where the nervous little man was already setting up his stamp. Okay, I said. I understand the play. Good, Grant said. He patted my shoulder. It was meant to be reassuring, but it felt like a handler patting a show dog. Do this right, Viv, and you never have to worry about fines again. We reached the steps of the stage. The music died down as the band leader saw Grant approach. The room fell silent, hundreds of eyes turning toward us. I felt the heat of the spotlight. This was Grant's element. He thrived in this. He expanded, his chest puffing out, his smile dazzling. Ladies and gentlemen, Grant boomed, his voice projecting without the mic, though he reached for it anyway. Thank you all for coming tonight. I know we are celebrating another year of me. Polite laughter rippled through the room. But tonight is about more than a birthday, Grant continued. It is about the future. As you know, with the old developer's health being what it is, we have had to make some hard decisions to ensure Pinecrest Meadows survives for another 100 years. He gestured to the 3 men in suits. We have found the perfect partners, and tonight we are making it official. He turned to me. The spotlight hit my face, blinding me for a second. But we couldn't do this without family, Grant said, his voice dripping with fake sincerity. My sister resident Vivian has been a silent partner in this journey. And though she prefers the quiet life, she wanted to be here tonight to give us her blessing. He held out his hand to me. Vivian. I stepped up to the microphone. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the wealthy neighbors who had ignored me for years. I saw the business rivals who were salivating over the acquisition. I saw the staff standing in the shadows, the only ones who knew the truth about my forgotten birthdays. And then I saw Miles. He was standing near the back by the entrance to the kitchen. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing his courtroom suit. He caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. Don't scream. Just ask the question. I took a breath. The air in the room was stale, recycled, expensive. I looked at Grant. He was smiling, but his eyes were hard, daring me to go off script. I looked at Elaine. She was gripping her clutch so hard her knuckles were white. I reached up and adjusted the microphone. I tapped it once. Thump. Thank you, Grant, I said. My voice was clear, steady. It is true. I usually prefer the quiet life. I usually prefer to stay in the background while you celebrate. I paused. The silence in the room deepened. But tonight is special, I continued. Because tonight I learned something about tradition. You know, for 10 years, I thought our neighborhood had a tradition of forgetting my birthday. I thought it was just carelessness. Grant's smile faltered. He took a half step toward me. Vivian, the papers. But it wasn't carelessness, was it? I asked, turning to face him directly. The microphone picked up the shift in my tone. It wasn't a speech anymore. It was an interrogation. It was a system. You didn't forget October 15th. You banked on it. A murmur went through the crowd. Vivian, Elaine said from the bottom of the steps. Her voice, a warning hiss. Get down here. I have a question. Grant, I said, ignoring her. Before I sign this paper that gives you my 12%, I have one question. I pulled the folded document from the waistband of my dress where I had tucked the printout of the email Miles had sent. If this deal is so good for the neighborhood, I asked, my voice ringing out through the speakers. Why is the $52 million purchase price being wired to a shell account in the Cayman Islands right now? The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the space. Grant froze. His face went from tan to ash gray in a second. That is confidential financial structuring. You don't know what you are talking about. I think I do, I said. Because I am the board secretary of the fund, aren't I? Or at least someone using my name is. I turned to the three partners. They weren't swirling their drinks anymore. They were staring at Grant with the cold, predatory look of men who realize they have bought a lemon. Did you gentlemen know? I asked them. Did you know that the unanimous proxy consent you are waiting for relies on a signature from a woman who didn't know she owned rights until 20 minutes ago? Cut the mic, Grant screamed. He lunged for the sound technician at the side of the stage. But it was too late. The words were out. The poison was in the water. And one more thing, I said, my voice rising over the sudden commotion. I looked straight into the camera of the photo booth I had set up in the corner. The lens that I knew was feeding directly to Tessa Carver's laptop in the van outside. I am Vivian Parker. I am the legal owner of 12% proxy rights of Pinecrest Meadows HOA. And as of this moment, I am exercising my right to veto this sale. I reached for the stack of papers on the table, the ones Grant had been so desperate for me to sign. I picked them up. Happy birthday, Grant, I said. And then, with hundreds of people watching, I ripped the signature page in half. The sound of the tearing paper was louder than any gunshot. Grant stood frozen, his hand halfway to the soundboard. Elaine had collapsed into a chair, her face buried in her hands. I dropped the torn pieces of paper onto the stage. They fluttered down like confetti, the only confetti I would ever get. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I stood center stage under the hot lights. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the homeowner who wasn't there. I was the only thing that mattered. My phone buzzed against my chest. A text from Miles. The wire is frozen. Tessa is moving in. I looked at my reflection in the glass of the teleprompter. I saw a woman in a navy dress alone, surrounded by enemies. But I didn't look weak. Vivian? I whispered to myself, my voice barely audible over the rising roar of the crowd. Today is your birthday, and it is the day they lose. The echo of my declaration about the Cayman Islands wire transfer was still bouncing off the ballroom walls, but the silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, and confused. The guests were murmuring, a low tide of whispers, but they hadn't fully grasped the implication yet. They thought perhaps this was part of a skit or a strange neighborhood inside joke that had landed poorly. Grant, ever the improviser, tried to salvage the wreckage. He stepped in front of me, blocking the audience's view, his back to the crowd. His smile was gone. His eyes were two burning coals of panic. You have had your fun, he hissed, his voice low enough that the microphone didn't catch it. Though I knew the device pinned to my dress was recording every trembling syllable. You made your little speech. You got their attention. Now sit down and sign the paper before I have security drag you off this stage. He gestured to the table where the documents lay. The community settlement agreement and the proxy transfer. The notary Darren was sweating profusely, his hand hovering over his stamp like he was waiting for a signal to flee. Elaine appeared at my other side. She didn't touch me this time. She looked at me with a mixture of fear and calculation, her mind likely racing through damage control scenarios. Vivian, she said, her voice tight, the partners are watching. Do not embarrass us. We can discuss the misunderstanding about the accounts later. Just finish the transaction. I looked at the table. I looked at the pen Grant had thrust toward me. The crowd was watching. The partners, the buyers were watching. They were waiting for the signature that would release the $52 million. I picked up the pen. Grant's shoulders dropped an inch. He thought he had won. He thought my outburst was just a tantrum, a final flare of rebellion before submission. Good, Grant breathed. Right there, next to the yellow tab. I held the pen over the paper. The tip hovered millimeters above the line, but I didn't write. Instead, I looked up at him. Before I sign, I said, my voice calm, amplified slightly by the microphone I had leaned back toward. I want you to do something for me, Grant. What? He snapped, checking his watch. We are losing the window. I want you to wish me a happy birthday, I said. Grant stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. Are you serious? Dead serious, I said. For 10 years, you have thrown a party on this night. For 10 years, there has been cake and champagne and music, but not once in a decade has anyone in this neighborhood said those words to me on this day. So if I am going to give you my rights, if I am going to give you this community, I want to hear it just once. The table went silent. For half a second, the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. Then from the back of the room, someone laughed. It was a nervous, jagged sound. Elaine forced a laugh, too bright and brittle. Oh, for heaven's sake, Vivian. Of course, we just forgot in the rush of the deal. Happy birthday, darling. There. Now sign. You forgot, I repeated. I nodded slowly. That is the official line, isn't it? You forgot. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I unlocked it and tapped the screen, turning it so Grant and Elaine could see. This is a photo from 10 years ago, I said, swiping. My 24th birthday. You are cutting a 3-tier cake. I am in the background holding a tray of appetizers because the caterer was short-staffed and you asked me to pitch in. I swiped again. My 25th. You are in Paris. I am in the driveway watering the plants. Swipe. My 28th. You are on a yacht. I am at the office filing your tax extensions. Swipe. My 32nd. Last year. You are standing right here on this stage and I am in the parking lot waiting for the valet to bring my car because you told me the community photo was over. I held the phone up to Grant's face. 10 years. Grant. 10 years of photos. And in every single one of them, there is a party. There is a cake. There is a celebration. But there is never a space for me. Grant knocked my hand away. The phone clattered onto the table. Stop being dramatic, he growled. Nobody cares about your pity party. This is business. Stop making a scene. You are right, I said, my voice hardening. This is business. So, let's talk business. I leaned in closer, my eyes locking onto his. If you forgot my birthday, Grant, if I am so invisible to you, then why did I get a notification last night that a home equity loan for $180,000 was approved in my name? Elaine gasped. She reached out as if to cover my mouth, then pulled back. That, Elaine stammered, that is a misunderstanding. It is an administrative error. An administrative error? I asked. An error that required my social security number, my mother's maiden name, my previous address. I turned to the notary, Darren, who was now looking like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. And you, I said to him, did you notarize that loan application? Darren, did you see me sign it because I don't remember meeting you until 5 minutes ago? Darren opened his mouth, but no sound came out. It is standard practice, Grant interrupted, his voice rising, trying to drown me out. We needed bridge capital. Mom handled the paperwork. We were going to pay it off tonight. It is for your benefit, Vivian. We are trying to help you build credit. Help me, I asked. By forging my signature. We didn't forge it, Grant shouted. He was losing control. The veneer of the polished treasurer was cracking, revealing the spoiled child underneath. Mom signed it for you. She has your power of attorney. No, I said instantly. She doesn't. I revoked that power of attorney 4 years ago when I moved out. You know that, Grant. The legal department sent you the notice. Grant froze. He looked at Elaine. Elaine looked away. So, I said, letting the word hang in the air. If I didn't sign it and I didn't authorize it, then who opened that account? Elaine stepped forward, her hands fluttering. Vivian, please, we can explain. I opened it. Yes, I did it. But I did it because we needed the liquidity quickly. If we had waited for you to come in, the rate lock would have expired. I used your old documents because the bank systems are slow. I was trying to be efficient. Efficient, I repeated. You used my driver's license from 3 years ago. You used my old passport. You kept copies, didn't you? You told me you were keeping them safe. But you were just building a file. It was for the neighborhood, Elaine hissed. And the fund? I asked, pivoting to the kill shot. The $52 million sitting in the charity account right now. Who authorized that transfer? Grant, because the bank records say I did. But I have never logged into that system in my life. Grant slammed his hand down on the table. Right next to the papers. It doesn't matter who typed the password, he yelled. The money is there. The deal is done. All you have to do is sign this one piece of paper to release it. Why are you burning down the house when you could be walking away with a check? He grabbed the pen I had put down and shoved it back into my hand. Sign it, he commanded. Sign it now. I looked at the pen. I looked at the paper. Okay, I said softly. I will sign. I lowered the pen to the paper. I watched Grant's chest heave. I watched the relief flood Elaine's face. They thought they had bullied me into submission one last time. I positioned the pen at the start of the signature line. Wait, Grant said suddenly. He reached out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was clammy. "What?" I asked, looking up. "Don't sign it. Don't sign it like you usually do," Grant stammered. He looked terrified. "The bank has a specific specimen on file from the loan documents, from the fund account." He lowered his voice to a frantic whisper. "Sign it the way Mom signed it, with the loop on the V and the sharp Z. If the signatures don't match, the wire will get flagged for fraud review." I stared at him. He had just given me everything. He hadn't just admitted to the forgery. He had admitted that the forgery was the standard. He was instructing me to forge my own signature to match the fake one they had created. I pulled my wrist free from his grip. I stood up straight. The guests were silent. The partners were standing up. The air in the room was electric with the tension of a storm about to break. "You want me to match the signature on the loan?" I asked, my voice carrying clearly to the back of the room. "Yes," Grant whispered. "Just do it." "You want me to match the signature on the fund account?" "Yes. Just match the damn file." I looked at the partners. I looked at the camera in the corner. Then I looked at Grant. And for the first time in my life, I looked at him not as my older successful treasurer, but as a small scared criminal. "You know, Grant," I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. "There is a saying in the fraud department." I dropped the pen. It rolled across the document, leaving a small streak of ink. "People only worry about the signature looking different," I said, "when they know they have been using a fake one all along." Grant's face crumbled. "I am not signing," I said. "And neither is the woman you created." I took a step back from the table. "The Vivian Parker you have been using to rob this community doesn't exist. And the real one, she is done paying your bills." Grant stared at the pen on the table. He looked at the unsigned document. He looked at the partners who were now talking into their phones, likely killing the deal. He looked back at me and his eyes shifted from panic to a pure, unadulterated rage. "You little bitch," he whispered. "You have no idea what you just did." "I know exactly what I did," I said. "I just blew out the candles." The silence in the ballroom did not last. It shattered like a dropped vase. Grant was the first to move. The rage that had flashed in his eyes was instantly replaced by a frantic survivalist instinct. He realized that the partners were watching. The camera was rolling and I had just publicly accused him of fraud. He needed to contain the blast radius and he needed to do it immediately. "Darren," Grant barked, snapping his fingers at the notary who was trembling behind the table. "Grab the papers. We are moving to the green room. The lighting here is terrible for the official photos." He lunged toward me, his hand clamping onto my upper arm with a force that was painful. To the audience, it might have looked like a treasurer guiding his resident, but up close, his fingers were digging into my bicep like claws. "You are coming with me?" he hissed into my ear. "Now." I tried to pull away, but Elaine was suddenly on my other side, boxing me in. She didn't look terrified anymore. She looked vicious. She turned to the crowd, her face arranging itself into a mask of tragic apology. "Please, everyone, continue with the champagne," Elaine called out, her voice trembling with a practiced wail. "My resident is having a bit of an episode. It is the stress of the birthday. We just need a moment of privacy to calm her down." She leaned in close to me, her perfume clawing and thick. "If you say one more word out there," she whispered, "I will tell the police you demanded $5 million to sign these papers. I will tell them this entire spectacle was an extortion attempt. Who do you think they will believe? The grieving president trying to save the community business or the unstable homeowner with a history of financial jealousy?" It was a brilliant pivot. In 10 seconds, she had rewritten the script. I wasn't the whistleblower. I was the hysterical, greedy antagonist. "That is a lie," I said, but my voice was drowned out by the sudden roar of the crowd. A man in a charcoal suit, the lead partner from the investment group, stepped forward. He wasn't smiling. He looked like a man who watched stock tickers for fun. "Grant," the man said, his voice booming over the murmur of the guests. "We are not interested in neighborhood therapy. We have a wire deadline in 19 minutes. If that signature is not authenticated and the confirmation code sent by 8 o'clock, the deal is void and my legal team will be filing for breach of contract and damages by 8:01. The threat hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "It will be done, Mr. Sterling," Grant shouted back, sweat visible on his forehead. "Just a formality. She is signing now." He shoved me toward the side door that led to the green room, a small parlor usually reserved for musicians or private meetings. Darren, the notary, scurried after us, clutching his stamp like a holy relic. Grant kicked the door open and dragged me inside. He slammed it shut and locked it. The noise of the gala was instantly muffled, replaced by the heavy silence of velvet curtains and panic. He spun on me. "Are you insane?" "I am perfectly sane," I said, rubbing my arm where he had grabbed me. "I just decided not to be your accomplice." "Accomplice?" Grant laughed. A high, hysterical sound. "You are not an accomplice, Viv. You are a nuisance. You are a speed bump." He began to pace the small room, running his hands through his hair, destroying his perfect coiffure. "Listen to me," he said, stopping in front of me. "Sterling isn't joking. If this deal falls through, the property values tank tomorrow. The creditors call in the loans. We lose everything. The clubhouse, the cars, the legacy, everything goes." "Then maybe you shouldn't have built the legacy on theft," I said. "It is not theft," Grant screamed. "It is leverage. That is how the HOA works. You borrow from Peter to pay Paul until you own the bank." He took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. He adjusted his tie. He looked at me and his eyes changed. The anger receded, replaced by a desperate, wheedling negotiation tactic. "Okay," Grant said. "Okay, you want something. I get it. Everyone has a price. I misjudged you. I thought you wanted a birthday cake. Fine, I will give you better." He walked over to the sideboard and grabbed a piece of hotel stationery. He pulled a pen from his pocket. "1 million, Grant said, writing the number down. "I will write you a personal promissory note right now. Cashable tomorrow morning. You sign the transfer. I give you 1 million. You can leave Austin, go to Paris, go to hell for all I care, but you will be rich." I looked at the paper. 1 million. It was more money than I would make in 20 years of freelance writing. "You don't have $1 million. Grant," I said quietly. "You are broke. That is why you are selling the community. You are trying to cash out before the house of cards collapses." "I will have it once the wire clears," Grant insisted. 52 million, Vivian. There is enough for everyone. Don't be stupid. Take the cut." "Why are you so desperate?" I asked. I took a step closer to him. The microphone on my dress was burning a hole in my chest. I needed him to say it. I needed the specific confession Tessa had asked for. "It is not just about the money," I said. "You are terrified. I saw your face out there. You are not afraid of bankruptcy. You are afraid of something else." Grant looked at the door. He looked at the notary who was trying to make himself invisible in the corner. Then he looked back at me. His face crumbled. The arrogance melted away, leaving behind a scared little boy who used to hide behind the sofa when his father raised his voice. "She will kill me," Grant whispered. "Who?" I asked. "Elaine. She set it all up," Grant said. The words came out in a rush, like vomit. The shell companies, the vendor accounts, the fund scheme, it was all her. She started it 3 years ago when the old developer got sick. She said we needed a war chest in case the board voted us out. She used my name. I said she used everyone. Grant cried. She controls the accounts. Vivian. I don't even have the passwords. I just sign the check she puts in front of me. I am the face. I am the treasurer. But she is the one moving the money. My heart stopped. This was it. The twist. I had always assumed Grant was the greedy one and Elaine was the enabler. But it was the opposite. Grant was the puppet. Elaine was the puppeteer. She had built a criminal empire inside her husband's community, used her son as the figurehead, and used her resident as the scapegoat. She told me that if anything went wrong, Grant continued, his voice shaking, I would be the one to go to jail, because my signature is on the corporate filings and your signature is on the fund approvals. She kept her name off everything. She is clean. So, you were going to let me take the fall, I said. I didn't have a choice, Grant pleaded. She is my mother. She said she was protecting the neighborhood. She said, if I just got you to sign tonight, we could disappear to the islands and fix the books later. He grabbed my hands. His palms were sweating. Help me, Viv. Please. If Sterling walks, the audit happens tomorrow. And if they look at the books, they will see the missing money. They will see the fake vendors. I will go to prison for 20 years. Do you want that? Do you want your treasurer in a cage? I looked at him. I felt a surge of pity, hot and sharp. He was pathetic. He was a 32-year-old man who was still afraid of his mother's disappointment. But pity is dangerous. Pity gets you fined. I don't want you in a cage. Grant, I said softly. Then sign, he begged. But I don't want to be in one either, I finished. Outside the door, I heard a commotion. Elaine's voice was rising, shrill and theatrical. She has been unstable for months. Elaine was shouting, clearly addressing the crowd near the door. She threatened suicide if we didn't give her money. We are trying to de-escalate. She was setting the stage for my destruction. If I walked out there now without concrete proof, I would be the villain. She was turning the witnesses against me. I pulled my hand away from Grant. I am sorry, Grant, I said. But I am not signing. Grant's face hardened. The fear turned into something ugly. Then you leave me no choice, he said. He nodded to the notary. Darren, stamp the blank page. I will forge the rest later. Darren hesitated. Sir, I can't do it. Grant screamed. Or I will tell them you were part of the scheme from day one. Darren slammed the stamp down on the empty paper. Thud. Grant grabbed the folder. I am going out there. I am telling Sterling it is signed. We will wire the money, and if you try to stop me, Elaine will tell the police you attacked her. He turned to the door. I reached into my pocket and found the small Bluetooth button Tessa had given me. One press. That was all it took. I pressed it. The signal went out. 3 floors down, in a van parked on the street, Loretta Shaw hit enter on her laptop. Inside the green room, nothing happened. But in the digital world, the walls were slamming down. Grant opened the door. He stepped out, holding the folder high like a trophy. It is done, he shouted to the partners. The signature is secured. Mr. Sterling looked at his phone. He frowned. Grant, Sterling said, his voice confused. I just got an alert from our compliance officer. What? Grant asked, freezing in the doorway. The receiving account, Sterling said. The fund account. It has been flagged. A fraud alert. Level 1 lock has been placed on it. Grant went pale. That is impossible. It is a glitch. It is not a glitch, Sterling said, looking at his screen. The alert code says internal whistleblower. The account is frozen. We can't wire the funds. Elaine, standing near the buffet table, dropped her glass. It shattered on the marble floor. I stepped out of the green room. The room was silent again, But this time the silence wasn't confused. It was expectant. I looked at my phone. A text from Tessa had just come through. We have the freeze. We have the audio of Grant blaming Elaine. But to nail her, to really nail her for the whole conspiracy, we need her to claim ownership of the idea. We need her to admit she orchestrated the identity theft. I looked at Elaine. She was staring at Grant with a look of pure venom. She knew he had failed. She knew the money was stuck. She turned her eyes to me, and in them, I saw the calculation restarting. She was about to speak. She was about to launch the Vivian is crazy narrative with everything she had left. My resident. Elaine began sobbing, clutching her chest. She must have called the bank. She is trying to hurt us. I didn't let her finish. I walked over to the microphone stand that was still live on the stage. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I walked with the steady, measured pace of a woman who owns the building. I picked up the mic. Stop crying. Mother, I said. My voice filled the cavernous room, cutting through her performance like a scalpel. Elaine froze mid-sob. The bank didn't freeze the account because I am crazy, I said. They froze it because the board secretary reported unauthorized activity. I looked at the partners, then at the guests, and finally, I rested my gaze on Elaine. Grant just told me something interesting in that room, I said. He told me he doesn't know the passwords. He told me he was just the face. He is lying, Elaine shrieked, dropping the act entirely. Her face twisted into a snarl. He is weak. He is a liar. Maybe, I said. But he said something else. He said the idea to use my name, the idea to turn me into a ghost wasn't his. I stepped off the stage and walked toward her. The crowd parted for me. I was the Red Sea and they were the waves. I stopped 3 feet from her. You told everyone I was unstable, I said. You told everyone I demanded money, but I just want to know one thing. I held the microphone out, offering it to her but keeping my grip tight. Grant says he just followed orders, I said. He says the plan to systematically erase me from the neighborhood, to use my birthday as the cover for 10 years of embezzlement wasn't his idea. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. So tell me, Mother, I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper that thundered through the speakers. Whose idea was it to forget my birthday? Was it the son you coddled? Or was it the president who needed a victim? Elaine stared at me. Her chest was heaving. The corner of her eye twitched. She looked at Grant, who was cowering by the door. She looked at the partners who were looking at her with disgust. She was trapped. And a trapped narcissist only has one defense mechanism left: superiority. She straightened her back. She wiped the fake tears from her face. She looked at me with a cold, sneering pride. He couldn't plan a lunch menu, let alone a community restructuring. Elaine spat out. The mic caught every word. Of course, it wasn't his idea. He doesn't have the stomach for what is necessary. What is necessary? I prodded. Survival, Elaine hissed. I did what I had to do to save this neighborhood from mediocrity. And if I had to use your name to do it, it is because you owed us. We fed you. We clothed you. You were useless. Vivian, I made you useful. The confession hung in the air, gross and absolute. I made you useful. She had admitted it. She had admitted she was the architect. She had admitted the intent. I lowered the microphone. Thank you, I said. That is all the bank needed to hear. I looked toward the main entrance. The heavy double doors swung open. Special Agent Tessa Carver walked in, followed by 4 uniformed officers and Miles Keaton. Elaine Hargrove, Tessa announced, her voice projecting without a microphone. Grant Hargrove, please place your hands where I can see them. Elaine looked at the police. Then she looked at me. For the first time, She didn't look at me like a resident or a tool or a nuisance. She looked at me like I was the one holding the knife. And she was right. Elaine stood there, her chest heaving, the echo of her confession still bouncing off the gilded walls of the ballroom. She blinked, seemingly realizing that her arrogance had just handed me a loaded gun. A ripple of nervous laughter escaped her throat. A cold, jagged sound that fooled absolutely no one. "Oh, stop it," she said, waving a hand as if swatting away a fine. "I am speaking metaphorically. Of course, I made you useful by giving you structure, by giving you a role in this neighborhood. Don't twist a president's words to suit your little victim complex." She turned to the partners, flashing a smile that was all teeth and desperation. "She is distraught. It is a mental health crisis. We will handle this privately." But Grant was not smiling. Grant was looking at the uniformed officers standing by the doors. He was looking at Special Agent Tessa Carver, who was walking toward the stage with the inevitability of a glacier. He looked at his mother, then at the police, and the calculation in his eyes shifted. The bond between mother and son is strong. But the bond between a narcissist and his own freedom is stronger. "It wasn't a metaphor," Grant shouted. His voice cracked high and thin. He took a step away from Elaine, raising his hands in a surrender motion toward the agents. "She told me exactly how to do it. She taught me." Elaine spun around, her eyes wide with betrayal. "Grant, shut your mouth." "No!" Grant yelled back, sweat pouring down his face. "I am not going to jail for you. You said it was safe. You said Vivian always disappears on her birthday, so it was the perfect time to do the paperwork. You said if she is not in the room, she can be on the page." The guests gasped. It was one thing to suspect neighborhood dysfunction. It was another to watch a son cannibalize his mother in real time. "You liar," Elaine hissed, lunging at him. "I gave you everything. You gave me a felony," Grant screamed, dodging her. "I didn't just watch them implode. I helped them along." I pulled my phone out again. During the chaos, Miles had forwarded the final piece of evidence to the audiovisual team I had bribed earlier, the team running the large projection screen behind the stage that was supposed to be showing a montage of Grant's achievements. "Grant is right," I said into the microphone. "She did teach him, and she wrote the manual." I pointed to the screen behind me. The image changed. Gone was the photo of Grant shaking hands with a senator. In its place was a blown-up image of an email dated 7 years ago from E. Hargrove to Grant Hargrove. Subject: October 15th strategy. Do not remind her of the date. If she remembers, keep the interaction brief. I need her off the property by 7. Once she is gone, we can proceed with the unauthorized signings. Keep her out of the loop. Her ignorance is our liquidity. Just make sure the cake is big enough for the photos so the staff can witness that she was celebrated before she left. The room went dead silent. The words on the screen were not open to interpretation. They were a confession of premeditated emotional and financial abuse. Mr. Sterling, the lead investor, stared at the screen. His face turned a shade of purple I had never seen on a human being. He looked at the torn contract on the table, then at Grant, then at Elaine. "You people are sick," Sterling said. His voice was low, but in the silence, carried like a shout. "Mr. Sterling, please," Elaine begged, reaching out to grab his sleeve. "It is just neighborhood correspondence. It is taken out of context." "The context is fraud," Sterling roared, shaking her off. "You are trying to sell me a community using stolen authorization funded by an embezzled charity account while laundering money to the Caymans. The deal is dead. My lawyers will be in touch before you even get to the police station." He signaled to his team. "Let's go." As the investors marched out, the vacuum they left was filled by the FBI. Special Agent Tessa Carver stepped onto the platform. She didn't need to shout. She held up her badge, and the authority radiating from her made even the wealthiest guests step back. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a federal crime scene," Tessa announced. "Please clear the room immediately. Mr. Hargrove, Mrs. Hargrove, you will remain where you are." "On what grounds?" Elaine screeched, trying to regain her composure. "This is a private party. We are executing a warrant for the seizure of all digital and physical records regarding the Pinecrest Meadows Community Fund," Tessa said calmly. "And we are placing a freeze on all assets associated with the Pinecrest Meadows HOA, pending an investigation into wire fraud, identity theft, and money laundering." From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Darren the notary was trying to crab walk toward the service exit, clutching his bag of stamps to his chest. "Officer," Tessa called out without looking. "Secure the notary." Two uniformed officers intercepted Darren before he could reach the door. He squeaked as they grabbed his arms. "I didn't know," Darren wailed, dropping his bag. "They told me she was sick. They told me she couldn't hold a pen. I just stamped what they gave me." "You can tell that to the licensing board," the officer said, snapping handcuffs on him. Elaine watched her world disintegrate. The partners were gone. The notary was in cuffs. The accounts were frozen. She looked at me, standing center stage, and her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You happy now?" she spat. "You destroyed it all. Everything the old developer built. Everything I tried to save. I did this for the neighborhood, Vivian. I did this so we wouldn't lose the clubhouse. So we wouldn't be poor." "No," I said, walking down the steps to meet her eye to eye. "You didn't do it for the neighborhood. You did it for the lifestyle. And even if you did do it for survival, it doesn't matter." I leaned in close, so only she and the recording device could hear me. "A neighborhood does not use their resident's name to steal money and then call it love," I said. "You didn't protect me. You consumed me." Elaine opened her mouth to argue, to spin another lie, but Grant cut her off. He had collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands, weeping openly. "It is over, Mom," Grant sobbed. "Stop talking." He looked up at Tessa. "I want a deal. I will give you everything. I have the list of the shell vendors on my laptop. I have the passwords to her private server. I know where she keeps the scanner she used to copy Vivian's passport." "Grant!" Elaine screamed, a raw animal sound. "She has it in the safe in the master bedroom," Grant yelled, desperate to save himself. "Behind the painting of the horses. The combination is her birthday. She keeps the stamp with Vivian's signature in there, too." Tessa nodded to her team. "Secure the bedroom. Get that safe." Elaine lunged at Grant, her nails aiming for his face, but an officer caught her by the waist. She kicked and screamed, thrashing like a wild thing caught in a net. The elegant socialite was gone. All that was left was a cornered rat. "You ungrateful brat," she screamed at Grant. "I did everything for you. You made me a criminal." Grant screamed back. I turned away. I couldn't watch them anymore. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was exhaustion. It was the heavy, crushing relief of finally putting down a weight I had carried for 10 years. I started to walk toward the exit. I wanted fresh air. I wanted to be away from the smell of expensive perfume and rot. But then the main doors opened again. The noise in the room died down. The officers paused. A wheelchair was being pushed into the room by a grim-looking man in a suit, a court-appointed guardian. In the chair sat the original developer. He looked older than he had on the video call. His skin was papery and his left arm was curled against his chest. But his eyes were clear. They were locked on me. "Vivian," I whispered. Elaine stopped struggling. She stared at her husband with genuine terror. "Calvin, honey, you shouldn't be here. It is too much excitement." Calvin ignored her. He ignored Grant. He ignored the police. He gestured with his good hand for the guardian to push him toward me. I walked to him and knelt down so I was at eye level. "You came," I said. Calvin took a ragged breath. He reached out and touched my cheek. His hand was cold, but his touch was gentle. "I heard," he rasped. His speech was slow, fighting the damage in his brain. "I heard you speak. I stopped them." "Calvin," I said. "I didn't sign." "Good," he wheezed. "Good." He looked over my shoulder at Elaine, who was now weeping silently, realizing that her last shield, her husband, was not there to save her. Calvin looked at her with a profound sadness. Then he looked back at me. "Vivian," he said, his voice gaining a fraction more strength. "Sorry." My throat tightened. "For what?" "For leaving you alone," he said. A tear leaked from the corner of his eye and tracked through the wrinkles of his face. "I thought money would protect you. I was wrong." He gripped my hand. "You strong. Stronger than them." I squeezed his hand back. "Thank you, Calvin." "Take it," he whispered. "The community, clean it." I shook my head slowly. "No, Calvin. I don't want it. It is poisoned. Let the creditors have it. Let the lawyers pick it clean. I don't want the legacy. I just want my name back." Calvin looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. He understood. "Vivian," Grant called out from where he was being handcuffed. "Vivian, please talk to them. Tell them I was forced. Tell them I am your treasurer." I stood up. I looked at Grant, the boy who had everything and threw it away because he was too afraid to work for it. "I have no treasurer," I said calmly. "I have a co-conspirator who turned state's evidence." I turned to Tessa. "Do you need anything else from me tonight, Agent Carver?" Tessa shook her head. She looked at me with respect. "We have the audio. We have the confession. We have the witnesses. Go home, Ms. Parker. We will call you for the formal deposition." "Thank you," I said. I walked past Elaine. She didn't look at me. She was staring at the floor, muttering to herself, trying to construct a new reality where she was still the victim. I walked out of the ballroom, down the hall of mirrors, and out the front door. The night air was cool and sweet. The humidity had broken. The sky was clear, filled with stars that didn't care about money or status or Pinecrest Meadows legacies. I walked to my car, my old reliable sedan with the squeaky brakes. It looked beautiful to me. It was the only thing I owned that no one had tried to steal. I sat in the driver's seat and closed the door. The silence was absolute. No screaming, no accusations, no fake violin music. I reached over to the passenger seat and picked up the small white bakery box. I opened it. The chocolate cupcake was a little tilted, the frosting slightly smudged against the cardboard. I took the single candle I had bought and stuck it into the center of the cake. I didn't have a lighter, so I used the car's cigarette lighter, pressing it in until it popped, then touching the glowing coil to the wick. The tiny flame flared up, casting a warm orange glow in the dark car. I watched it dance. For 10 years, I had waited for them to celebrate me. I had waited for them to acknowledge that I existed. I had let my happiness depend on their validation. But tonight, I had learned the most important lesson of my life. You don't wait for someone else to light the candle. You light it yourself. I looked at my reflection in the dark window. I saw a woman who had walked into a fire and come out carrying the water. I saw a woman who was free. I took a deep breath. "Happy birthday, Vivian," I whispered. I blew out the candle. Smoke curled up in the darkness, smelling of wax and victory. I started the engine, put the car in reverse, and drove down the long winding driveway, leaving the flashing lights of the police cars behind me. I didn't look back. I had a whole new year to start living.